whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is gracious, if there is any excellence, and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Dear Lord, as we begin tonight, we ask that you help our children to come to know all of these things, to know what is true, to know what is good, to know what is beautiful. And above all, help them to know you, who are truth itself. And we pray together in the words that our Lord taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us
this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Yeah, so tonight the topic is our K-8 curriculum. And as many of you know, we've got a very distinctive curriculum among schools in the Archdiocese of Washington, and really among schools anywhere. It's about 15 years ago, a group of parents, who were committed to taking a school that was on the verge of closure, decided that they needed something different, and that gave birth to what we call the St. Jerome Educational Plan, which has been replicated in some form in just a number of schools around the country. And what is this plan? I think it's really grounded on the insight that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And this changes every facet of our existence. Thinking a different way. There's a quote that I love from St. Irenaeus: "The glory of God is man fully alive." And here at St. Jerome's, we want our children to be fully alive. We want them to develop the most human things that are in them. We want them to, as we mentioned, to know the truth, to experience beauty, and to be good, to come to know what is good and to live what is good. So this whole curriculum that we have is geared around forming this sort of person. We're in a world where so many folks talk about college and career readiness. And clearly, there's nothing wrong with being ready for college. There's nothing wrong with being ready for a career. These are necessary. We believe that they're not sufficient, and so we want to cultivate something else in our children. So you'll hear more about that this evening. I will hand it over in just a moment. I'll be available for questions more, but at this time I'd like to hand it over to our Vice Principal, Michelle Trudeau, who will give an overview of our curriculum, and then we'll get to hear from teachers with the various components that they are able to teach. So, Michelle.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Good evening. Before I give you an overview of our curriculum here at SJ, let me start by setting the backdrop for you. Imagine it's the beginning of the school year, and you're in 4th grade. The previous year in 3rd grade, you'd studied the Middle Ages, how Christianity rose in Europe after the fall of Rome, the various religious orders like the Benedictines, the Franciscans, and Dominicans. You read about the courage of Joan of Arc, you studied the architecture of castles, and learned about the relationships under feudalism. You talked about the roles of knights, the invasion of the Vikings, and the launching of the Crusades. You studied various animals and their habitats. You memorized the great chain of being and all of your multiplication tables. This year in 4th grade, you'll be studying explorers and how they were both alike and dissimilar to the missionaries and crusaders you studied in 3rd grade. You'll travel with them to China, Africa, India, North and South America while studying maps and map making. You'll study the solar system, the earth, and the oceans. You'll observe how the art and music of the Middle Ages changed during the Renaissance. You'll study inventors and their inventions, the upheavals during the Age of Enlightenment, and life during the Industrial Revolution. You'll get better at answering the question, whom did they serve, God or Mammon? And all the while, your imagination, your moral imagination, will be formed by reading good literature that highlights the themes and problems of what you're studying. This is a snapshot of what happens here at St. Jerome Academy. 15 years ago, St. Jerome's was very different. It was a school with a declining enrollment that looked like it might have to close its doors. At the time, several people approached then-Principal Mary Pat Donahue and suggested the school adopt a classical curriculum. Among those proposing this were college professors, high school teachers, and professional writers who had seen the gradual decline in competent writing and critical thinking. Over the years, they had read student papers that used poor logic, made weak arguments, and had fragmented sentences. And they wanted students to learn not only how to write well, but to think well and speak well. 15 years later, the switch to adopt a liberal arts approach has proven to be an important decision. Not because St. Jerome didn't have to close its doors, and not because our enrollment has increased, and also not because of its sound techniques. It's important because, in addition to all those things, it is a resounding answer to the question, what is education? In the seminal book Classical Education, authors Veith and Kern explain that a classical education is essentially timeless, since it is grounded in human nature and in the nature of learning. It offers a framework that is disciplined and liberating, open to the past and to new knowledge. Classical education aims to find the good, the true, and the beautiful across the liberal arts and sciences. It cultivates wisdom and virtue by liberating the mind and teaching and feeding the soul through what is observed, pondered, learned, and understood. It integrates the subjects so that the people and stories throughout history, most importantly Jesus Christ, are continually being discovered. Indeed, in our Catholic school, we strive to see God in all things. The beginnings of a Catholic education are rooted in the Church Fathers. More than any other institution, the Catholic Church has a historical claim to classical education. As early as the 6th century, there was an attempt to gather classical writings and use them in Christian formal schooling. Over the centuries, theologians and teachers from Thomas Aquinas to Elizabeth Ann Seton have written about what should be included in a Christian school. A natural question arises. Isn't the study of the ancients a part of another time and place? Because this education is rooted in human nature and human endeavors, which are timeless, it is open to all questions that we humans pose, both in the past and in the present. With the study of salvation history as its centerpiece, the St. Jerome teachers take the students through different eras to observe, learn, and explore. It uses the liberal arts as a substance in an integrated way. In kindergarten, the children study the cradle of civilization, do diverse hands-on work in nature studies, and have PE several times a week. Mrs. Campos will talk more about this year. In first grade, the students study ancient Greece, where they learn that the Greeks were very competitive, always striving for excellence. Sister Mary Seton will talk more about the first grade. Second grade is the Roman year. This year takes the students from Greece to Rome, where Veni Vidi Vici is the theme. Besides the sacramental year for First Reconciliation and First Communion, the second grade students study the physical and earth sciences, start learning multiplication and math, memorize 7 poems from the 7 hills of Rome, and continue with the fundamentals of language. Because they are young and we are concerned with educating the whole person, they continue to have 2 recesses a day. We've already learned about the third grade's theme, for the glory of God, and the fourth grade theme, whom will you serve, God or mammon? The fifth grade is the American year. Students begin with colonialism and end with the abolition of slavery. For their theme, they learn to ask the questions Dominican friar Antonio Montesino asked in 1511 in his sermon about the American Indians. Are they not men? Do they not have rational souls? Are you not bound to love them as you love yourselves? What begins with the study of human dignity and colonialism continues through the American Revolution and the Civil War. And all the time, Montesino's questions are being asked. they learn that quotes by Saints Augustine and Aquinas, whom they previously studied, are the speeches of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Excuse me. And they leave knowing an unjust law is no law at all. The 6th, 7th, and 8th grades repeat the historical cycle by taking a more in-depth approach to what they learned in kindergarten through 5th grade. In 6th grade, we go back to the beginning and study the ancient Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, and Israelites. And in 8th grade, they study the Renaissance and cap it off with the study of America. Our 7th grade year is the study of Christendom, which spans the gap between those 2 years. I once asked a graduate how her education set her apart from her high school peers. What were the significant differences she saw? She told me many things, but one thing that really struck me was a comment she made about her honors Brit Lit class. She said she was able to enter into discussions with 16th and 18th century poets like John Donne and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and have an understanding of what they meant when they talked about wisdom, beauty, truth, and virtue. While many of her classmates struggled to understand the analogies and metaphors, she was able to think, speak, and write about them. Her ability to imagine these themes within their historical context and to go on to find her place within this world is the gift that we give to our children. As parents and teachers, it is the best educational inheritance we can pass down to them and answers for us, what is education? Thank you. I pass it back to you, Kevin.
Okay, so at this point we will hand it over to Heather Campos, who's our kindergarten teacher, and she'll tell us about the Egyptian area.
Hi, good afternoon, or good evening I should say. My name is Heather Campos. I'm the kindergarten teacher, as they've said, here at St. Jerome Academy. This is my 30th class, so I've actually been here before we had switched over to the classical curriculum. I come at it from a different perspective. I was also a student myself. My daughter had gone there, so I come at it as a parent perspective, and now also as a teacher. So the classical curriculum in the kindergarten year, the way how we approach it is, as Ms. Trudeau has said, is through an integrated curriculum. Many of our different subjects are completely combined, especially when it comes to religion and history and our nature studies. The children may be exploring about how the Nile River floods. We will actually flood the Nile River. We'll talk about it. We're going to compare it. Maybe in the spring, when we start talking about Ashurbanipal and the Assyrians, we're going to build a city wall, and then the children will figure out different ways how they're going to break into the city wall, the best ways that they will go about it, above it, below it, through it. This is all about getting the children to wonder, to be inquisitive, to be curious, and to ask questions, and to not be afraid to ask the questions. We do this through a lot of hands-on manipulatives and materials that we can use as much as possible, giving the children the freedom to be their age and to explore as along with their learning. We do have a very specific program that we use for their literacy, the Literacy Essentials, where they are learning to spell, write, and to read. We pull in grammar perspectives as well with the children. They learn how to start forming sentences so that they can learn to not only think well, but they're speaking well, and now they can write well. We're laying that foundation. We talk to the children about it's the pyramid. We're the base of the pyramid. If you don't have a strong base for your pyramid, it's all going to collapse. So we're trying to use an analogy with the children to get them to see how important it is that we are going to be learning. That gets into a better perspective when they get into the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. Our children do a historical poem and chant that they do. And it's about 30-35 minutes long that the children go through. So the things that we're learning now in the kindergarten year, they're building those memories. We have songs, rhymes, repetitions that we're going to continue to do to help them build that memory, so when they get up into those upper grade years, they're going to be more than ready to be able to receive it and then continue it. The math program we use is Dimension Singapore Math. Mostly is all hands-on. They're working down on the floor together. We may be in pairs, separately, and in groups, where they're able to use those manipulatives, where they're exploring the different perspectives that they need to be able to do to learn the content and the skills. As the children continue to go on, we're trying to get their thinking and ready for when they move on to the next grade, as when they go into Sister Mary Seaton's class, when they're learning about more with the Greeks and the Romans, and they'll have a better basis for the early civilizations that they can then do more comparisons and contrastions when they can move up to the upper grades. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Campos. And now it's over to Sister Mary Seaton, who's a Nashville Dominican sister and one of our first grade teachers.
Good evening. I'm very happy to speak to you today about a school that I love very much, and to tell you about the first grade, which I love very much. And I thought one of the best ways to tell you might just be to give you a sort of a day in the life of a first grader. So as the children come to school, they're able to, I have a marvelous classroom library, and I'd love for the children to check out a book every day so they can take it home and read it with their family. We usually start the day with a math lesson, and the math I find to be really amazing. We do a lot of work adding and subtracting to 100, and as the year progresses, the children are able to, they have a great number sense and are able to juggle numbers in their minds in a remarkable way. Also, the day, is our literacy program, which Mrs. Campos mentioned, is woven throughout the day, and that the literacy program integrates handwriting, phonics, spelling, reading, grammar, and writing. And I have found in teaching this over the past 4 years that the children, again, as the year progresses, and particularly now in the third quarter of the year, it's really exciting to watch how they embrace the beauty and order of the English language in a remarkable way. And then they just love words and take ownership of these words through all the work that we do. And as we do our literacy, that would be related with all the poetry that we recite. My class also has a daily recitation in which they can recite. I ask questions, they respond for about 10 minutes. And then other poems that we have, poems that are related to our study of history, the ancient Greece, poems that are related to our nature studies, which in first grade is plants and animals. And I just want to tell you, even today in our nature studies lesson, I laid out on the table and everyone was surrounding the table, 25 pictures of various animals, and I just had them look at all these. Okay, we'll just take a couple minutes to look at all these animals, and then tell me what you see. We're going to put them in, you children are going to order these, put them in groups, and then you have to explain why they're in these groups. And it was great class discussion, and why is the dolphin not over here with the shark and the swordfish, but it's over here with the wombat and the moose. So anyway, very fun, but to be able to engage much in the comparison and contrast and making distinctions. And then with our nature studies, we do a lot of drawing. We love to draw. It hones their attention skills and observation skills, and they become really, that's what they have throughout St. Jerome. We do a lot of drawing, and they get to be very good at it. Of course, our religion class is a really important part of our day, and in first grade that includes much study of the liturgy, of the saints, of the Holy Rosary. As a whole school, we have Mass once a week, and we make frequent visits over to Jesus and the Blessed Sacrament in the church. History, super rich in first grade, and they are really excited about the ancient Greeks. We just finished reading about the Battle of Troy and are getting ready to begin the Odyssey, and the students are very excited for that. So a lot of rich things going on, and it's just an intellectual piece that's laid before the first graders, preparing them for second grade and on up, but also just enjoying the school day as it's given. So I'm super grateful for the opportunity, and I hope you can be part of it.
All right, well, thank you, sister, so much. And just on a personal note, Chris said that, I have, he said 6. I have 5 children in the school. One of them is currently in sister's class. The other one, another one was in Mrs. Campos' class last year. both, just exuded happiness, do exude happiness, when they come home from school. We want happy children. My experience as a parent has been that my children have been happy with these two teachers, but really the entire faculty. So we have another teacher, and you've heard from kindergarten and first grade, and I suspect some of you are interested in the lower grades. Our middle school is, I think, really exciting. It is very exciting. And we've got Mr. Clerks, who teaches 6th grade, the integrated humanities, and he'll speak to us about what we call the logic stage or the middle school. So, Will.
Alright, thanks, Kevin. Good evening, guys. Can you give me a thumbs up or a wave just to make sure you can hear me okay on here? Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. As I mentioned, my name is Will Clerks. I've been at the school for 6 or 7 years now, and I'm one of the 6th grade teachers. So the school is double-tracked now, up through the 7th grade. Next year we'll have 2 8th grades. So 2 years ago I welcomed a new 6th grade partner, and so I'm one of the 2 6th grade teachers. And Mrs. Trudeau, our vice principal, went over the structure of the curriculum as well. I'm happy to say more about that. She's, I'm sure, happy to repeat any of those things, and you can read them online. So what I'm going to try to do here is thread the needle between giving you some insight into the classroom and telling you some stuff to give you necessary context, but also not just repeating things that you can read online in your own time if you'd like. Sister Mary Seaton took a good approach here, I think, and Mrs. Campos was showing kind of a structure of a day in the life. So I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, Chris. If that works, it should be able to do that. So good. I'm seeing this. Hopefully you can see a copy of, this is what a 6th grade schedule looks like here. Things have been a little funky today, as I'm sure any of you with kids in school already know, with all of the snow days and stuff. But let's just imagine there was such a thing as a normal week in a school, and this is what it would look like. We start the day in 6th grade with a double block of our humanities. For us, what this means is an integrated history and literature class, is one way to think of it. Knowledge, truth, is one, right? Christ is one. And so it's not so much, we talk about integration a lot because of the way subjects are taught in so many places as separate, discrete, distinct things. It's not so much a way of bringing things together as it is a way of not dissecting things that are intrinsically aligned. So for instance, right now, when you get some idea of the historical arc here, Sister Mary Seaton was just talking about how in 1st grade they finished up the Iliad, and they're moving into the Odyssey. Now I should note, not the Iliad itself in, the Homeric Greek as an original thing, nor even in a built translation, right? Sister Mary Seaton's not reading that to them in 1st grade. But the story of the Iliad, right? And the story of the Trojan War. And that brings me to another point that is, again, special about St. Jerome's. Good teaching involves story so much of the time, right? We are storytelling creatures. And so one of the fastest ways to the heart of any student, of any person, is to present something in the shape of a story. And stories like the Trojan War, stories like the story of Achilles, the story of Odysseus, are just fascinating to 1st graders, to 6th graders, to 16-year-olds, and to 60-year-olds, as far as I've found. Anyway, I digress a little bit. Sister mentioned that in 1st grade they're talking about the Trojan War and they've just finished it up. Well, we've just finished up part of the Iliad in the 6th grade when we've gone through it for the 2nd time. Again, some chunks actually this time of the Iliad itself in translation. They're even learning a few chunks in the original Greek, just a few lines here and there. They really get a kick out of that, learning a different language. And so do I. But the story of the Iliad. And so we'll be moving again into the Odyssey, and so that kind of mirrors things here. And one of the ways we celebrate that at St. Jerome's when we reach the end of a certain unit is to hold a feast. And Mrs. Trudeau, I think, alluded to this in her talk at the beginning, but these feasts are a sort of culmination of the curriculum, a way of celebrating what it is we do here and what it is that makes us human, right? Feast is centered around a meal. It brings us together. It's something where we get to celebrate what we've learned, knowledge for the sake of knowledge, camaraderie and communion, which is so appropriate for a Catholic school where the source and summit of our faith is a meal, right? Is the holy sacrifice of the Mass. And that's just our humanities in the morning. We have math, which in the middle school things become a little bit more departmentalized. So math is taught in separate groups that are somewhat leveled, and you'll have several different math teachers, and if you're a middle school student, at that point you'll go to a different room. And if I just pick a Monday schedule, you'll see that there's also nature studies. So again, nature studies is taught by a teacher who teaches 5th through 8th grades here. And so in 6th grade in nature studies, they'll be learning about electricity and magnetism. They'll be learning about simple machines, levers, all this sort of things. Very hands-on, very experimentally based, really, really engaging. It's fun for me to sit in on those classes. We can say more about the nature studies as well and how that works later on. You'll notice that after lunch, most days this week, 6th grade has religion. The integration works a little bit differently in different grade levels, depending on A, the level of the students, but also B, the nature of the curriculum. So for instance, in my year, the 6th grade, we're going through the historical cycle again for the first time. So we're studying the ancients again. That means for me that I sort of think of things in kind of two parallel rivers. You have sort of the river of Athens and the river of Jerusalem. You've got the river of faith and you've got the river of reason here. And they're combined in the Roman Empire, which sets the stage for the Incarnation. And so for us, it really makes sense to think of the Israelites and the Hebrews sort of on one track. What is God doing under the surface in the Old Testament? And then what do we see in terms of secular history with these big powers like the Egyptians, the Greeks under Alexander, the Romans as well? So that's part of why history and literature are combined in the 6th grade, and then religion I teach a little bit separately. For us, that's a story of salvation, going through these Old Testament stories and seeing how the big picture connects. Going in a little bit more depth to learn about covenants, tackling things in the Old Testament. Right now we're looking at Genesis 10 and what's called the Table of Nations, which is a unique document in the ancient world that shows how all of humanity is descended from one common family through Noah and one of his sons, Shem, which is where we get the sons of Shem, the Shemites, the Semites, talking about Semitic peoples. One of his descendants, Eber, which is where we get the Hebrew peoples, and one of his descendants, of course, Jacob, Israel, we get the Israelites. So that's the sort of thing there. And then you'll see a couple other specials classes as well. Art, Latin, both taught by separate teachers in the middle school. Gym class twice a week for middle schoolers. And one more thing I forgot to mention are what you'll see as Logos classes in here. So Logos is this really incredible Greek word. It's really hard to translate. But if you want to be really simple about it, it just means the Word. So when we hear the Gospel of John, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. That word is translating the Greek word logos here. So things that we do that touch on what Mrs. Trudeau mentioned, how we want our students to be formed in speaking well, and writing well, and thinking well. All of those are elements of logos. So we do something called touchstones in some of the grades. This is like, you can think of it as sort of practice for seminars. We do something, we have different grammar classes and writing components as well that vary teacher to teacher. And we also have something in here that's listed as roots, which is about the roots of the English language. So a weekly class in which the students learn 3, 4, 5 new either Greek or Latin root words that are at the base of many of our English words. So for instance, just today, let me think, what did we have? We had some of the Latin numbers this week. Septem, which is 7, Octo, 8, and Novem, 9, which are the roots of words like September, November, October. Then you can ask, well, wait a minute, October's the 10th month. Why would it mean 8? Well, then you have to get into the history of the Roman calendar and what happened with 2 months being inserted, July and August. Why are they called July and August? Julius, Augustus, they're the names of these people. Mr. Clerks, are we in roots class right now? Are we doing writing, or are we doing history? I don't know. What's this all about? So this is the way things kind of work in the classroom, and maybe you're getting too much of a flavor of that from me right now. I'm happy to say more about 6th grade or about my colleagues in 7th and 8th grade and my impression of what they do, and I think I'll stop there, except to say that one of my favorite parts of teaching here is the people. And so I think this is maybe not one of, maybe my favorite part is the people, right? like any human institution, the people are the most frustrating part and absolutely the best part. And they're what keeps me here. And I mean the students and I mean my colleagues. And, if you're looking for a reason to be a part of this community, I think that's it. So, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much, Will. It was wonderful. And so we've got Michelle Orhan, who teaches middle school math. And so I'll let her tell you about the math curriculum. She'll talk about the structure a little bit, how there's some differentiation that occurs, especially in middle school. So over to Michelle.
Hello, like Mr. Song said, my name is Michelle Orhan. I've been at St. Jerome Academy for 24 years now. So like Ms. Campos, I was there before we were classical and went there through the transition to the classical curriculum. And I cannot speak highly enough of the classical curriculum and what it has allowed me to have the freedom in my classroom to just be with my students and help them to see the beauty of mathematics. So I'm going to start with a quote from our educational plan, because I think this speaks very beautifully to what our goal is by the time our students go from kindergarten through 8th grade. And it says, the study of mathematics should instill in students an ever-increasing sense of wonder and awe at the profound way in which the world displays order, pattern, and relation. Mathematics is studied not because it is first useful and then beautiful, but because it reveals the beautiful order inherent in the cosmos. And every year I start off with my students and give them this quote by Galileo that says, mathematics is the language with which God has written the universe. Because I think that speaks so beautifully to what math truly should be when students have a full and well-oriented understanding of math. So how do we go about doing that? Because that sounds very beautiful, but the practicality of that is that mathematics tends to boil down to this very, just bit of use and thing that we have to learn how to do. But the study of mathematics is more than just the doing of numbers or the use of numbers, right? So we use a Singapore approach to mathematics. And while no approach to mathematics is perfect for every mind, we truly do believe that this helps our students in the grammar stage access mathematics in a beautiful way. So, because I don't think it has been addressed, but the school is broken into the grammar stage, which is kindergarten through 5th grade. And the grammar stage is focused on memorization and, working your brain and just like letting the kids at those younger grades be the sponges that they are. So the Singapore method helps that aspect of a young student's brain by starting out every lesson in a concrete manner. The Singapore method is meant to start in the concrete, so hands-on. So for those of you who might want to attend our Montessori meeting next week, please do, because that is where you will see the beginnings of everything being very concrete. The work in the Montessori and in the kindergarten classrooms really builds up that ability to work concretely with numbers and with how shape and form works. So the Singapore method starts with the concrete, with the hands-on. There are manipulatives in the classroom. Children are touching and doing mathematics and seeing it at work. And then it progresses from that concrete hands-on to a more pictorial representation, to drawing pictures, to using number bonds, to putting numbers and seeing how those things work together and actually giving visual representation to it, or creating a story to go along with the mathematics. And then the last thing, the final thing that we do, and the thing that is typically in most mathematical classrooms around the country, the first thing is the algorithmic process. So the 3 + 5 = something, right? And then you have to fill in the blank. And while there is a beauty in the algorithm, and while it makes sense to all of us because we've all been through mathematics education in our younger years, we can see it now. But have you ever been asked to describe long division and how long division works? it's not an easy task to do. But when you truly understand how place value works and you've been able to concretely work with the mathematics, you have a greater understanding of how the numbers are working and how the world is working through the mathematical processes that we do. So then once we get to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we step away from Singapore, the text series from Dimensions Math, like was mentioned earlier, and we take a more holistic approach. Like Mr. Clerks mentioned, our students in 6th, 7th, and 8th are leveled based on their ability, not so that we can separate them, but yet so that there are smaller groupings that can have a teacher that approaches the way that their minds work, the way that they need to approach the mathematics. So in the logic stage, which is meant for our students in every subject to be able to access the topic more fully and go into more depth into those things, we want our students to explore. So for instance, my 6th graders today are starting a geometry unit. And actually, my 6th, 7th, and 8th graders are all starting geometry units right now. And so my 6th graders today learned about the tools of geometry. Because you can't access geometry until you can get those tools in your hand and physically work with them. And then the next step of geometry for us is the very first page of Euclid's Elements. So the first page of Euclid's Elements is a beautiful just exploration of the words of geometry and how important those words are. So we take time to really focus on the words and then explore what those words mean. And we draw those things and we identify those things in the world around us. In 7th grade, we have moved from the two-dimensional geometry of 6th grade and 7th grade. Now we're exploring the Platonic solids and seeing how the world around us is built. And in 8th grade, we're starting to read a book called Flatland in mathematics class to explore the kind of meeting of two-dimension and three-dimensionality. So that our students get a full picture of what geometry is in the world around them, because I think we do ourselves a great disservice when we don't allow our students to access some geometry. But throughout the years, they do their skills. They memorize their times tables because that is an important skill. All of the skills that were drilled into our heads as children are all so important, but there's so much more to the beauty of mathematics. And we want them to be able to then take those skills that they use in mathematics and those skills that they're building there and be able to talk about them and be able to go back to their classrooms and see those things at work in the world and in the historical time periods that they're studying, in their nature studies, in what they are actually exploring. In every class, they should see how mathematics can aid them in those things. And so that when we send them off to high school into the rhetoric stage, they're ready and able and willing to talk very deeply about mathematics and explore the things that are yet unknown to them. I am also the director of the school musical because another thing that we do think is very important are the arts. And for those of you out there that are musically minded, I think math and music go so beautifully together, at least they do for me. And so we want to make sure that our kids have access to not only the beauty of the curriculum, but the beauty of the arts as well. So we do the physical arts in gym. They do get 2 gyms a week at every grade level, but in kindergarten they have it 3 times a week. They see art. They see an art teacher every week who teaches, about form and light and structure. They also get music class up through 5th grade. And then in 4th grade and up, they have the ability to join the school band. They have the ability to join the school choir and advanced choirs. and they also have the ability to audition for the school musical. And I think that's about it.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle. That was wonderful. At this point, we will. I'll turn it over to Chris, who will tell us a little bit about just some admissions and enrollment logistics, some of the deadlines that are coming up. I would encourage you, though, stick around for some of the Q&A that we'll have afterward. I think some of the richest discussion that we've had in previous years has been the questions that parents bring, and we've got the teachers live. So
that's the fun part.
Yeah. We usually allow about half the time for the presentations, and then we have an equal amount of time for question and answer, which is usually lively. So again, my name is Chris Curry, and I'm the Director of Enrollment here. So I'm your admissions counselor if you decide to apply, and I can help walk you through the process individually, but I'll just give you a very brief overview right now. The first stage is the application stage. So we have an online application. There is some required documentation, like a birth certificate. For students who are above kindergarten, they also require a teacher recommendation. For third grade or above, they require standardized test scores. And then eventually, if the students enroll, they're going to be also required to submit immunization records and a medical form. Now, after the applications come in, we start to schedule assessments and interviews. So the deadline for making an application is going to be February 28th this year. We moved it back again a little bit just because the weather has made things a little bit compressed here in February. But after February 28th, we're going to be doing all of our assessments and our interviews. So if your child is a Montessori age student, then there's a classroom visit that's scheduled. If they're kindergarten or first grade, we have an assessment for each applicant. We also have assessments for those who don't have standardized test scores, who are older than second grade. Typically, those students will have been tested in their schools, and then you can just submit copies of those scores. Each family who's applying for the first time also has a video meeting with the principal, about 15 minutes long. So we'll schedule all those things very shortly after the application deadline. There's also a deadline for financial aid that comes about the same time. It's actually February 27th. So if you want to apply for tuition assistance, or here we have sibling grants. So if you have more than one child enrolled, the second child, third child, etc., will get additional discounts, but it is required to fill out a financial aid form to qualify for a sibling grant. Even though you're always going to get at least a certain amount, we do want you to fill out that form. So then after all that information has been submitted by you and we've had the assessments and interviews, then we'll have our admissions meetings in the early part of March, and then afterwards the notifications of admission or waitlist status will be sent out by the 15th or 16th of March. After that, you have 2 weeks to enroll. Fill out another form. And then after that period is over, for all spots that have not been filled, we'll go back to the waiting list and we'll admit more students. So we'll continue to admit students throughout the spring and maybe even into the summer, depending on circumstances. But the most students will be admitted at first admission. So I definitely recommend that if you're going to apply, try to apply by February 28th, so you'll have the best chance of your child getting in. If you have any questions about how to make your best application, then that's what I'm here for. So just email me and call me, and I'm happy to help. So that's it.
All right, thank you, Chris. So at this point, we'll open it up for questions, for discussion about the curriculum. And I think we try to keep up with a lot of the questions in the chat. I think we may have missed something. So yeah, just go ahead and feel free to raise your hand or feel free to ask your question out loud. Got a shy bunch tonight.
I can chime in. Hi, my name is Mrs. Sandrine, and I just had a quick question to follow up with Chris on the scholarship portion. For some of the other Catholic schools that we've looked into, they also had some parish-related financial aid, which was basically if you were associated with some, like a Catholic parish, a registered member involved, you can get some sort of verification, or whatever parish is associated with the school. That also helps with some aid. Is that the same at St. Jerome's, or is that also available as part of the financial aid assistance?
So we have a few different kinds of tuition assistance. What you were just describing is called the Catholic grant. Although we don't technically consider that financial aid, it is a discount on the tuition rate for those families that are active participating members of a Catholic parish. And it's a 23% tuition discount off the base rate. I mentioned already that we have sibling grants that are not necessarily dependent upon financial need, but if you have financial need, the grant will become larger. And any child who fills out a financial aid form is eligible to be considered for need-based aid. The Archdiocese of Washington has its own tuition assistance program, which is based upon the financial aid form that you'll fill out for St. Jerome, and then St. Jerome will also administer its own need-based aid as well. So about 70% of our students do get some form of aid. That's not including the Catholic grant, which I say is not technically considered to be financial aid. But in addition to that, there's 70% of our students who get something off the tuition rate based upon having siblings or some form of financial need. I think our average grant is usually about $4,000.
Thank you very much, Chris.
You're welcome.
Do we have other questions?
I have one more if you don't mind.
Sure, go.
This might be me cheating a little because I'm also interested in the pre-K program as well. But is that application deadline the same across the board for the pre-K programs too?
Yes.
February 28th. Okay, perfect.
I have a question. My son is 3 years old. He's on the potty training stage right now. Is that acceptable in your pre-K?
For the Montessori for the 3-year-olds, as opposed to the toddler program, which is more the 2-year-olds, the 3-year-olds do expect that students are toileted. We know that there's a little bit of a spectrum. It's not always a binary when it comes to potty training. So there is a little bit of flexibility, but the idea is that they're able to operate, without diapers.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I have a question.
Yes.
My daughter, I applied for my daughter last year, and I was wondering if this year we have to do the meeting with the teacher again. And she was waitlisted last year. Do I have to do a meeting with the principal again? My bad.
In general, I believe that we will do that. It would be good to have that conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And Ms. Sandrine.
Sorry, I think I'm putting a ton of questions today, but just for the age, I call it an age restriction for a better lack of words. So my daughter teeters around the whole September group, right? It's not September 1st. And so within the program, do you do the same thing in the pre-K side in terms of evaluating whether they're put in pre-K 3 or 4, depending on that threshold, right?
So on the pre-K side of things, I mean, you have the toddler room, which some children will start that like just before their second birthday. It's mostly 2-year-olds, and then once they come over to that's actually in the church basement. There's a room there, across the street in our main school building is where we have our 3 through 5 and really 3 through 6-year-olds by the end of the year. They're in the same classroom, so really there's not much of a distinction between the 3-year-olds and the 4-year-olds.
Oh,
as far
okay,
as
that's
interesting.
interesting.
As far as a lot of like they do different activities, they're learning more and more. They're able to do more of the Montessori works, but it's the same classroom.
Okay. Oh, wow, that's great. That's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. And Ms. Garraway.
Yes, I have one more question. How do you evaluate applicants year after year, especially families who reapply?
I mean, a lot of it is based on what are the spots, and the reality is we have in the past had to turn away a number of families who would really be a good fit. Children would no doubt flourish, but I think when families are reapplying, it definitely indicates that there's an interest in our distinctive curriculum.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Noel.
Hello. I was curious if you could go into a little bit more about the observation for the pre-K and the first graders as part of the application process.
So yeah, those are significantly different. For the pre-K, the Montessori primary classes, we take in groups of up to six children at a time, and then they're observed by 2 teachers interacting with the materials with each other and with the teachers. And the purpose is for the teachers to observe them and to determine whether they're developmentally ready to begin work in a Montessori classroom. For first graders, the assessment is more traditionally academic. It'll be a reading and math-based assessment, and there will also be a social and emotional learning component to that assessment as well. And again, the purpose is just to make sure that they're ready to start at that grade level in our school.
I'm sorry, I may have misunderstood. Is there an assessment for the non-Montessori kindergarten as well?
Yes, kindergarten. Every grade from K through 8 is required to either have an assessment or to submit standardized test scores. Because most schools don't have standardized testing before 3rd grade, then we expect to be able to have all of those applicants come in, and we will assess them ourselves.
There's a question about open spots for the 3 through 5-year-olds. I don't have those numbers offhand. I would say that we don't have as many spots per grade in the pre-K as we do later on. So all that is to say is, if your 3-year-old doesn't get in, don't give up. We have a lot more spots that do open up in the kindergarten year, just numerically.
Yeah.
For the school operating hours, this week's been fun. Typically, 8 o'clock is when we begin. 8:10 is the late bell, and we dismiss at 3:10. And for the 3-year-olds, our 3-year-olds, many of them are half day. They're dismissed at 12.
Just a quick word about admissions for pre-K and for kindergarten. I have to say, generally speaking, our pre-K Montessori classrooms are the most challenging to be admitted to, just because we have a very large number of applicants, and then many of the spots are promoted from the previous year. So our 3-year-old Montessori primary children, a number of them are going to be coming from our Montessori toddler room, for instance. However, because the Montessori primary program goes through the kindergarten year, anyone who applies for kindergarten will be applying for our classical kindergarten classes, of which we have 2. And so those are generally new students. They're not being promoted from a younger class. And so admission rate for kindergarten is typically much, much higher than it is for our pre-K classes. So just like Kevin said, don't give up if it is challenging to get in for a first child in our Montessori primary or Montessori toddler program. But very, very frequently, those children will get in for kindergarten later.
Yeah, and understandably, we've got a bunch of folks asking questions about specific grade levels, how many spots, and the reality is February 4th, we don't necessarily know. I mean, this family might be moving away, they haven't told us yet, that sort of thing. So I would say, typically there's at least, a spot or two, occasionally a little bit more, per grade, but it's hard to predict in February.
Yeah, our re-enrollment deadline is actually also the same time as our first admissions deadline, so that's when we're kind of learning what our initial openings are going to be. Admissions decisions are going to be in mid-March. That question was just asked.
So waitlist for before and after care. I mean, there's room. If you are a student here, we have spots for you in before care and after care. Okay, so a couple questions. So just to repeat for the aftercare question, if your child is enrolled here as a student, we will have a spot in before care. We'll have a spot in aftercare, should you need that. And then we had Ms. Berkey ask a question about the kindergarten curriculum. I don't know, Heather, if you want to give a really quick recap.
Sure, the kindergarten curriculum, we study from the ancients, beginning with creation. We go up through the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. Our history and our religion is completely integrated, where we're going back and forth between Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt. And our study program, a lot of it is also integrated with our religion and our history. So we'll be building different things. We're going to be exploring different facets of the buildings, the architecture. We also go through with our reading program. It's more of a holistic program for reading, writing, and for spelling. And we use a lot of different stories to integrate within our religion program to go toward different morals and virtues. And it's more integrated throughout the school day instead of being something separate. We do have a separate time slotted for our separate subjects, math, religion, history, but oftentimes they're going to be more of an integrated approach as well. It may say it's going to be history, but it may be nature studies. It's going to be studied at that time. And the children often, they'll be able to tell you exactly what they're working on at that time. Our math program is with the Synchro Math. It is basically all hands-on at our first initial introduction of a new content, and then they move into more of a paper pencil and an explanation of exactly what they're doing. But the basis of our program is trying to get the children to see the wonder and the beauty of the world around them and to be able to not only appreciate it, but to then try to explain it to others as well.
So we had a couple questions about music and about after-school activities. And Mrs. Orhan mentioned briefly the musical. So we're doing The Sound of Music this year. Last year it was The Wizard of Oz. That's a lot of the children really just love to be a part of this. Our choir sings at Mass every week. They're really good. They're, encourage you to come 9:15 almost any Tuesday for our school mass. Ash Wednesday we'll have mass. The children just sing beautifully, and we have 92 kids in the choir. We don't have enough room in the choir loft anymore. We have a really good band as well, and so students are able to get the lessons there. We have an orchestra that presupposes that your child already knows a little bit about how to play a stringed instrument, but they're able to then come together and do that as an after-school activity. So that's a little bit about the music program. As far as some of the other after-school activities, our parish, St. Jerome Parish, has a very robust CYO athletic program. They play other schools in the area, St. Ambrose, Holy Redeemer, etc., etc. It's close to 250 kids who participate in at least one CYO sport, and that involves basketball, starting with the 6-year-olds all the way through the 8th graders. It's cross country, soccer, track and fields. So there's a lot of those opportunities right here. The parish also sponsors really active Cub Scout, PAC, Boy Scout troop. American Heritage Girls are very active. My 7th grader, he goes camping once a month with the Boy Scouts who meet right here on campus. It's fantastic. We've got some clubs. Our math counts meet. We've got a knitting club. There's a whole bunch of smaller after school clubs that meet. So looking for other questions. Not sure if I missed anything. So do we have any other questions? So there's a question about field trips. So yes, we do have field trips. I can let the teachers say more about how they choose field trips. I know Heather is taking her kindergartners next week. Where are you going, Mrs. Campos?
We're going to the Natural History Museum. Typically we do that in the fall, but with the government shutdown this year, got shifted a little bit. So typically in kindergarten we take 3 different field trips throughout the school year. We usually do in the fall the Natural History Museum because we're studying different animals as well as Egypt, and they do have a very nice Egypt exhibit as well as the fossils and animals. In the end of the school year we do the National Zoo, and that's another culmination of the different animals that we've been talking about in their habitats. And then in the middle of the school year we try to vary it up. It depends on different things. We've gone to the Kennedy Center. We have done different plays that we've been able to go to. It just varies. We try to integrate them within the scope of what we're learning about, so it has some basis for the children to be able to relate to.
And so all the grades go on, some field trips. I would like to mention one. I guess I would say our biggest field trip is the upper grades participate in what we call the American History Recitation. And so the upper grades will all go to. Last year we went to Fort McHenry to where the Star Spangled Banner was born. And they're there kind of telling the entire history of the United States through excerpts from the Declaration of Independence, the words of Frederick Douglass, the words of Martin Luther King, and that might be the link that Mr. Clerk's just put in the chat. It's really just a cool thing, and I'm not sure if we've publicly announced it. So between friends, we're going to go to Arlington Cemetery, and again. It's just really cool for the kids to be able to do this, with so many of the rich historical locations that we have in this area.
One field trip that we've had for the first graders is to go to the Botanic Gardens. It fits perfectly with our study of plants, and one thing that we've done with that is that all the children bring their sketchbooks and their crayons. They each have a box of 48. Really important to have lots of different colors. And the first year that I took the children there was so delighted when we first entered in, and perhaps you've been there with that big atrium that has so many different kind of plants right from the beginning, many trees. And I don't think we were there 5 minutes before most of the children just sat down, took out their sketchbooks, and just started drawing. And I thought, goal achieved. We could go home and they would have because they're just engaging in the beauty right before them. So anyway, really marvelous. We also go to the aquarium in Baltimore, and that also goes right with our nature study of animals. And so many of the things that we see there, whether it's the dolphins or the jellyfish or the sharks, we've already studied throughout the year, and then we've drawn those also. So it's a great opportunity for the children to see it all live.
Yeah, thank you, sister.
And just before the snowstorm, the 7th and 8th grade went to the Cryptology Museum up by the NSA. So we try to make sure that our kids have a wide variety of experiences in a wide variety of, resources in this area.
I should mention we also don't charge a field trip fee, so we try to make sure there's no barriers for children to participate.
Well, this might be the last call for questions, I suppose. I'd like to thank again all the parents for joining. I think this is a wonderfully informative session to have the teachers here. If you haven't been to school, though, I'd really encourage you come and take a tour. There's magic in these classrooms, and it's hard to convey all of that with adults talking. When you see the children chanting Beowulf, when you see the children looking at a Fra Angelico painting and just like having these profound theological insights, there's a magic that happens there. So I definitely would encourage you to come and see if you haven't done so. And so every Thursday we're open for tours. Chris will be your guide, and hope to see you around.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.
All right, good night, everyone.